The scene then shifts to SW Corporation, where GA is asking her guard how the kid is doing. The guard remains silent for a moment, but then points out that the kid should be finishing up his training session with Team 3. GA then asks if Jin was taken to the hospital to get checked out and what the doctor said. The bodyguard reports that Jin had a few bruises but nothing serious to worry about. GA reflects on how Jin saved her just in time, and we can tell that she has a soft spot in her heart for him. She tells her bodyguard to check in on Jin just in case, as you never know what symptoms might develop after a car accident. She's concerned that if the media finds out the crash was staged and Jin gets hurt, it could create a real problem. Well, I already had a hunch from the start that the accident was staged because they just wanted to assess Jin's caliber. We then see Jin again, donning his school uniform back. Seokju asks him what's going on, noting that Jin seemed to be holding back compared to his last session. Jin points out that he does not want to get on the bad side of everyone. He then asks Seokju why he's still hanging out with the security team, since he initially thought Seokju had already finished his security training and moved on. Seokju sighs and explains that, contrary to what Jin might have heard, he was never an official guard. He only started because of his family and because he grew up with Yeona. Since he was good at being a bodyguard, he stuck with it. He admits that after seeing how Jin rescued Yeona from kidnappers, he realized he's not as skilled as he thought he was and felt he needed to improve. Seokju mentions that he got all his training from SW but is curious about where Jin learned his moves, because he seems like a trained professional. Jin simply responds that he learned it on the streets where he used to live. Seokju senses that Jin isn't telling the full truth, but decides not to press him further. After they finish preparing in the men's locker room and head out, they find Yeona standing outside, eavesdropping. Jin doesn't bother to engage with her and continues walking, but Yeona quickly speaks up, asking if he's not planning to try more field work today. Jin looks confused, and Yeona blushes as she explains that she thinks it would be a good opportunity to hang out, and it won't take too long. Jin remains silent, and both her guard and Seokju stay quiet as well after hearing her odd wish. Later, a bunch of guards are stationed outside while Yeona and Jin stop by a stall to grab some food. Yeona excitedly explains that she missed cup noodles and triangle kimbaps so much while she was in the US. As Jin looks at his triangle kimbaps, he has a flashback to an unpleasant memory where his food fell out of the wrapper and hit the ground. Seokju looks a bit bewildered by the rundown spot they've chosen for eating. Yeona notices and asks Jin if he's not going to eat anything. Our boy then replies that he doesn't think he should eat with her since he's supposed to be guarding her. Yeona is startled by this, and Seokju quickly explains that Team 3 is responsible for escorting Yeona right now, and their job is to blend in as her companions while guarding her from close by. Yeona charmingly agrees and tells everyone to just dig into the food. Meanwhile, Seokju reflects on how Yeona picked the convenience store near his home on purpose because she knew he would decline if she took him somewhere nicer. Yeona then brings up the accident that happened while Jin was escorting Jaye and asks if he's okay. Jin replies that he's fine, all while staring at his triangle kimbaps inside the packaging. Yeona then asks if Jie gave him a hard time, noting that Jie is known for being super demanding and harsh. In response, Jin simply says everything went smoothly. Yeona finds this hard to believe, as it doesn't sound like Jie at all. She comments that Jie only smiles when she's insulting others. As they chat, Jin looks at Yeona's pleasant personality and finds himself drifting back into his memories. He remembers her father, utterly exhausted and injured, with Jin himself panting heavily, gun in hand, scanning for enemies. Her father tells him to leave him behind, saying that at least one of them should survive. He adds that he doesn't have much time left, and even if he's saved today, he won't live much longer. He reassures Jin not to feel bad about abandoning an injured man because he's just glad that Jin stayed to help when everyone else refused. The father's only regret is not being able to see his daughter's face one last time before he dies. Jin tells him to stop being sad about it and insists that since he is still alive, he should just stand up and go see his daughter. The father's face lights up at Jin's words, feeling a glimmer of hope even in this despairing situation. The story picks up right where we left off, and as the flashback fades, Jin turns to Yeona and asks if they can talk alone for a moment. The girl is startled to hear this and repeats his question, asking if he means just the two of them. Jin responds positively, so Seokju decides to step away, saying he'll give them some space. Once Seokju is out of earshot, Yeona asks what's going on and why Jin suddenly wants to talk privately. In response, Jin drops this name, Inguk Sin. Yeona quickly catches on that Inguk Sin is her father's name, and she is now even more confused why Jin is bringing this up out of the blue. Jin then asks Yeona what her father was like. Yeona looks puzzled because she is not quite sure where Jin is going with this. She eventually sighs and explains that her father was a busy man who spent a lot of time working overseas. They weren't very close because they barely saw each other. She goes on to tell him that her father fell ill, and the doctors told him he didn't have much time left. Despite the bad news, He kept working and ended up falling sick while abroad. She still doesn't understand why someone would choose to spend their last days working instead of being with loved ones. She was on her way to see him because he couldn't manage the flight back home, but he passed away before she arrived. She further continues, explaining that her father worked himself to death without ever having one last moment with his daughter. And if she's being honest, she admits that she still resents him for that. She is still not sure why Jin is asking about her father, but she claims that she would not have opened up if our boy had not saved her from the kidnappers back then. Once again, Jin's mind flashes back to a construction site. There, her father is talking to him again. He says he's doing all this because he wants to help, and as a parent himself, he felt compelled to do something for these children because it was the only way he could face his daughter. He admits he hadn't been a good father, and if he had known sooner, he would have spent more time with her. To him, family is more important than anything else in the world. Back in the present, Jin reveals to Yona that she was the reason her father worked until the very end. This news shocks the girl, and she asks him what on earth he's talking about. Jin then explains that he's here to deliver the final request of his client. He reveals that her father wanted to tell her that he wanted to see her one last time before he died, and that he's sorry he couldn't make it happen. These are the words her father wanted Jin to deliver to her. We flash back once again into the past, where her father tells Jin that this is an official job, and he must carry it out no matter what. He further says that whether he lives or dies, Jin will be the one to deliver this message to her. Yona is stunned to hear that Jin met her father before he passed away. After dropping this bombshell, Jin simply grabs his bag and begins to walk away, leaving Yona wide-eyed. Tears start to well up in her eyes as she wonders if her father really did say those words. It seems like Jin is also going through his own development arc and has finally begun to understand something he didn't realize back then. He's starting to see the meaning behind the request he assigned to fulfill. You see, whenever Yona's father tried to offer anything to Jin, it wasn't about making himself feel better, but rather, it was simply because he wanted to protect Jin. The father simply made that request to get Jin away from the battlefield, because he was trying to do what he could to help him.